All right, boys, Meta just acquired Scale AI for $14.8 billion. But what the heck does that mean for you and me? Well, in this video, we're going to explore what exactly happened, why that matters, and we're going to look at, we're going to close this out with a potential business idea, potential MVP. And again, on this channel, what we're really looking to do is find gaps in the market in where you and I, the regular average dude, can actually make some money and build wealth and build a strong future for our family. That's what this channel is about. If that's interesting, smash subscribe and let's talk about it. Okay, so Meta acquired Scale AI, $14.8 billion. Not only did they acquire Scale, but they acquired their CEO, Alexandr Wang, and 50 of their top employees. And this is really big deal because Meta has been falling behind in the AI world. You know, they released Llama 4, which was really, I was really excited about it. It's open. It was an open source code. You could just build and create all this stuff, but what they have not released is higher level reasoning, which platforms like Claude, Perplexity, and OpenAI have released. And you really need that for the more complex sort of stuff. Now, you know, Facebook, Llama is going to be good for creating images and stuff, but it's not going to be as great for developing code, back-end stuff, that sort of thing. So they're investing. And this is really, guys, what it comes down to is it's a race to superintelligence. Because the company that can get to superintelligence first is going to have massive, massive benefits and advantages. So it's kind of come down to a race to superintelligence. And at any rate, that's what they're doing. What is superintelligence? Essentially, that is an AI model that's smarter than every human on Earth combined. That's like insane, right? But that's what they're working towards. So anyways, what is Scale? What is Scale? So Scale is a data labeling and annotating company. And what does that mean in layman's terms? What that means is they provide metadata on the data. Okay, that they basically are giving context to the data that goes into these large language models. Large language models cannot function without good, clean, proper data. That's a prerequisite to giving you a good result as a consumer. Okay, so I'll just give you a quick example of what that might look like. So you ask a question to Meta's Llama, and what it's going to do is it's going to scour the web, it's going to look for news results, things like that. And if an article goes into the LLM, well, what is that article actually about? It needs metadata attached to it. That's what Scale does. So an article could be classified as sports, news, entertainment, etc. And then it can kind of break it down by article, by segment, by post, etc. It's basically taking all the data, putting it into little slots, and then handing it back out to the LLM to make decisions on, right? So that's what it does. Okay. Anyway, incredibly important. Data is the key. And quite frankly, I think this is one place where companies, specifically Meta, X or Grok, so Llama, Grok, and Google's Gemini have a real chance to stand out because they have so much data. Like, I think, you know, some people understand this, not everyone does, but if you're using a platform like Facebook or X or Google, if you're using it for free, you're the customer, okay? There is no free lunch. They're getting your data, they're getting your information. I know people say like, well, there's privacy issues, da-da-da. Guys, they are getting so much data on all of us, okay? And at any rate, by getting that data, it's going to give them better ability to create better models. They're going to have more data to train their models. In fact, there are a couple lawsuits that are happening between Disney and Midjourney for basically allowing you to create Mickey Mouse AI images. They don't like that. There's also a New York Times versus OpenAI and Microsoft lawsuit happening. These are a pretty big deal because basically these companies are saying, hey, you're training your models off of our data, and it's creating a new type of copyright law that's coming out. So any attorneys out there, this would be a huge place to make money is finding solutions there, you know, as far as what is classified as copyrighted material, what's private, first party, third party data, all that stuff. And in my opinion, I'm not going to get into legal stuff here, but if your LLM is just copying and pasting copyrighted material, that doesn't, you know, that's a problem. But if your LLM is taking information, repurposing it, summarizing it, creating lists, I think that there's been enough of a significant change. But again, I'm not a copyright attorney, so I'm not going to go into that. Regardless, that's what's happening. So companies like that are driving Grok, Meta's Llama, and Google Gemini have access to a lot more data, so it's going to give them a big advantage in this AI race. Okay. Plus, Google has YouTube. Again, this is kind of where all this data labeling kind of plays a place. And by the way, if you're a software engineer, you disagree with anything, if you know what you're talking about, you disagree, please feel free to type it in the chat below. I'd like to hear from you. But the challenge though that these companies run into is the data actually good and is it useful? And I think that's where the data labeling and annotating is going to be important. There was a post that went viral last year where somebody had asked Google Gemini how to get the pizza to stick, or the cheese to stick on their pizza because it kept falling off. And what Gemini suggested was, well, you should probably use glue to glue down the cheese, because some smart-ass Reddit user had written that. And obviously that's terrible advice. And quite frankly, if you're not using critical thinking, your God-given brain, you're gonna have trouble, because you do not want to be eating glue, ladies and gentlemen. I know it sounds complicated to all us millennials and Gen Xers out there, maybe even you Gen Zers. Probably not a good idea to eat glue, okay? So go take that as you would. So at any rate, in 2024, Meta lost 4.3% of its top tier talent, and Meta is going all in. They want to invest. That's why they bought out, that's why they invested in this company, 49% of scale. They do not have a voting share, enough to vote, but they certainly do have enough to leverage the tools. And I think, again, for where Zuck's at, he just wants to invest and get the best talent in the field. The best talent, develop the best software, win the AI race to superintelligence. Okay, so this is all a big deal, super big deal. Again, the AI slop is a problem. You need to make sure that your data is good, and I think that's where they're investing at. So that's kind of the quick 411 on what's happened, what the implications are. Meta's going all in. I would not bet against them. They're just a huge company, tons of money, tons of power, and they're going to do it. So with all that said, I want to give you a pretty cool, I think, AI business idea. And I just want to reiterate, like I do in most of these videos, that if you're an average person who is starting to build software solutions with AI, what we want to do is we want to keep it very simple. We don't want our user to have to work too hard. We want to keep the architecture simple, 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 simple. And what we want to do is we want to use programs like Replit, like Grok, like OpenAI, API, like 11 Labs to create interesting solutions to problems. And we want to create an MVP. We want to create a minimum viable product, okay? We want to test the market. And I've said this in yesterday's video, but I'm looking to create 10 different softwares in the next year just to see which one works. You know, 9 of them will fail. I'm hoping that one really takes off. That's kind of where I'm at. So we want to create minimum viable product. And we don't want to reinvent the wheel and start something brand new. What we want to do is we want to surf waves that are already on the market. We want to create maybe like apps or additions to other programs and products. Once we've proven MVP, that's when we bring on expert software developers, and we can invest more capital once we've proven concept, we have some cash flow, we have users, etc. That's where we're aiming for. So one of the problems that I've had recently, and I think this is kind of an interesting solution or an interesting problem with the solution, is in Slack channels and messaging apps. You know, you're having conversations with teams in these platforms, and there's all these different channels and conversations happening in channels. This even comes up in Google Docs too, although Gemini is pretty effective. But let's use Slack as an example. Slack is a very ubiquitous. Lots of people are using it. It has an API, so you can connect it into your Replit account pretty easily. But the problem that I have with using Slack is there's all these different channels and all these different chats, and I can't remember who was I speaking to in which chat and what happened there. There's all this different chatter. Well, what if there was an app that you could connect to Slack that reviewed all the text in all the chat in all the different channels and aggregated it together to make it easy to understand? So you wouldn't have to say, oh, what's Bill from accounting working on? Or what's Mark from the marketing department working on? What is Todd from our CTO working on? Where does it? how does it all play together? And I know for me that would be super helpful and kind of contextualizing things, because it would help me to develop better prompts. It would help me to leverage the AI tools that we're already using to a higher degree. So that's an idea that you might take that to the bank. And again, what we're doing here is trying to keep it simple. We're using a couple different apps here. We'd be using the OpenAI API, connecting that to Replit. We would be using the Slack API, connecting that. And again, here's another thing that I think is important, okay? What we're doing in this case, you might not necessarily be trying to build an entirely new business, but trying to work within the context of an existing business or an existing company that you work for. We're looking to solve problems with these softwares, with these solutions. We're leveraging AI to automate and solve problems. If you can save yourself time, if you can help your company be more profitable, that is probably something that you can leverage to sell to the next company. Look how much we did. And so getting paid to create case studies within your organization, I think is a great way to go. Creating one-touch, one-button solutions is a great way to go, because if it works for one company, it can work for others. So again, we're talking in the beginning about what's happening with Meta, which I think is really interesting, but we're closing it out with interesting problem, interesting solution, I think. Type in the comments below if you think it's an interesting solution. And then kind of looking at the concepts, at least how I'm seeing them and how I'm leveraging these tools to try to be more productive and solve interesting problems using AI. Again, finding that MVP. All right, guys, catch you next video. Peace.